Welcome back to another episode of the Tech Talks Daily podcast. I'm your host, Neil C. Hughes, here to guide you once again through the fascinating intersection of technology, business, and everyday challenges that we face globally. And today I've got a guest whose work epitomizes the transformative power of emerging technologies in addressing real-world problems. A little bit more than just another iPhone with a better camera. So today, Jon Trask, the CEO of Dimitra, is going to be joining me. And they are a global agricultural technology company that's on a mission to empower smallholder farmers across the globe through blockchain, AI, IoT technologies, and so much more. Now, why should you listen to today's conversation? Well, as global temperatures continue to rise and deforestation becoming a pressing concern, I want to explore how the blend of blockchain and AI could actually be a game changer in sustainable agriculture. And Dimitra is already operating in more than 18 countries and has connected over 100,000 farmers to an ecosystem that aids in increasing yields, reducing costs, and mitigating risks. And we're going to discuss everything from machine learning-based advice to decentralized finance loans and how this company is pushing the boundaries of what technology can do for our food systems. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Canada, where we're going to discuss the far-reaching implications of blockchain agriculture and how these innovations can potentially be a part of the solution to some of our planet's most pressing issues. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, my name's Jon Trask. I'm the CEO of Dimitra. Dimitra is a blockchain-based system for agtech, and we really focus on providing a broad variety of services to small farmers around the world. Typically, our farmers are under 10 hectares, and we have a mobile application or 5 actual mobile applications that we built for different areas of farming. Our main product is called Connected Farmer, and we are operating projects in about 18 countries right now on Connected Farmer, working with governments and cooperatives, different farming organizations, and then we also have some product focused on the supply chain. So in those cases, we deal with the end users trying to collect data from farmers. It's an ongoing development. We have about 150 team members and are developing new technology and releasing new modules for our different platforms just about every week. And we team skill set, artificial intelligence, machine learning, satellite, mobile technology, and web technologies, as well as IoT sensors. So it's been an exciting few years as the company is evolving and our products are evolving, and we bring some of our vision to fruition. Thank you for having me here today.
No, the pleasure is mine. It's a real pleasure to get you on the podcast today, because every day I try and get people thinking about areas that are impacted by technology that you might not associate with tech. And agricultural technology for smallholder farmers is a great example of that. And one of the things that put you on my radar was how at Dimitra, you've got this blockchain-based platform that's combining AI, satellites, and IoT sensors to specifically cater to smallholder farmers. So can you tell me more about that? And also, maybe to set the scene, the kind of unique challenges that farmers are facing right now and how your technology is addressing them.
Yeah, so a number of years ago, I was doing very large enterprise products and projects, and saw a need and saw a gap in the smallholder farmer space. There's a real bifurcation, I guess, within the technology industry around providing data to farmers. There's lots of money dealing with big American and European farms, but small farmers have struggled with access, and addressing some of those accessibility issues is part of our objective. We work on a project by project basis. So our application is not sold to individual farmers. It tends to be sold to coffee producers and cooperatives and governments. And we work hand in hand with them in order to deal with some of the accessibility issues in applying each of those technologies. I think, our objective really is around how do we take each one of those challenges and make an impact on either the yield, the cost, or the risks associated with that farm. And I'll give you an example. Project right now with an African organization called 1 Million Avocados. Their objective is to plant 1 million avocado trees and support farmers in Kenya, Uganda, and East Africa. The challenges that they have there that we're addressing with the system, start with blockchain. The very first challenge in Uganda is in Kenya, is being able to export their avocados. And in order to export avocados, a farmer needs to have certain documentation, certain quality reports, and certain assessments on their farm. And not having that data prevents them from getting the best possible price for their avocados. So with the capabilities of the system, a farmer there may receive about $1.50 a kilo for their avocados. Domestically, they may only receive 30 or 40 cents for those same avocados without the additional regulatory documentation. So we use technology in order to help them with that. And then we look at it. So now we help them get from 30 or 40 cents to $1.50 for a kilo of avocados. And then we take them to that next step and say, well, how do we produce more avocados? And we provide IoT sensors to measure soil quality and understand what's going to impact the output of the tree. So a lot of farmers around the world don't have great access to soil testing. And even if they have access to soil testing, they don't have great access to an assessment of that technical soil test. So we provide a tool that assesses that soil test and tells them exactly what they need to do to their soil. We worked on a project in Indonesia over the last couple of years, and the soil test there revealed that we can produce another $3,000 per hectare just by adding certain fertilizers that are not commonly used. And we can assess the cost of those fertilizers in order to help them make decisions. And then the last component of what we do around blockchain and other tools is really taking the farmers, and over the last few years, we built an exceptional system to evaluate farm performance. We use satellite, we use drone, we use photographs, we use farmer observations, and we can tell if a farmer is doing a great job, a good job, or a poor job. And as a risk tool, we make that available to lending institutions, and we do some lending ourselves as well. So one of the problems in Africa is just access to money in order to grow their farms, whether it be capital or a loan. We can assess the performance of a farm, and in the absence of your standard credit reports and things like that a farmer there may not have, assess whether there's a good opportunity for the farm to pay back a loan or a capital commitment. And so we create micro opportunities where an individual may provide a number of trees to a farm in order to help them expand. And blockchain becomes a great piece of that. So as we combine these components, satellite reports and drone reports, and then all of the capabilities within our systems with the financial aspects of the business, we help these small farms grow. And they're not growing into multi-million-dollar farms. They're growing from a farm that maybe they struggle to feed their family to a farm that is productive and they have excess income and the ability to feed not only their family, but participate from a community perspective and help their local communities or their local cooperative be more successful. And so that's really exciting for us too.
Incredible examples, and it really brings it to life, because there'll be a lot of people listening, maybe people in the farming industry, that may think that blockchain, AI, and IoT all sounds incredibly cool, but what value does this provide farmers? I know your platform promises to do things like increase yield, reduce costs, mitigate risk, etc. But are there any other examples or case studies that you can share around what measurable benefits farmers have seen in the 18 countries where you operate?
Yeah, I mean, so we do some marketing work. We have a beta market system that we've built that's being tested right now. And initially, we're working in South America and Indonesia around marketing coffee products to help increase price. Part of just dealing with our network is that we have a large sales network, 70 people in the world. And then we have a large project network across these 18 major projects that we're working on. And we try to couple those so that our sales team, who knows buyers in Europe and North America and other countries around the world, can focus on supporting some of those organizations in achieving price increases or solidifying a relationship to get more volume. So we're seeing a lot of that now, where our European network is working with our Asian network in order to deliver on products. We have a project with a group called Abrafrutas, and in Brazil, they are the Fruit Association of Brazil. And I think they manage 70 or 75% of the Brazilian fruit exports. They've engaged us to address certain issues. They have a big issue with citrus canker there. And we've since built a citrus canker identification system to identify the disease early and mitigate the risk associated with that. So that's been tested. It's gone through, pilot and prototyping. And now, with some success in identifying citrus canker early by over 90% accuracy, we're building a commercialized system for that every farmer in Abrafrutas will be able to use. We have another program with them around soil nutrition and are building out some soil nutrition capability for them so that farmers can understand that soil nutrient and potential. We've also got AI tools where you can snap a picture of an avocado or mango tree and not only see what current avocados are on there, but we can extrapolate with LiDAR and other tools how many fruit are on the tree and what the expected yield is. And that will help farmers with loans. If they can go around, take pictures of their farm, as tool says they have, 4 tons of avocados on there, they have the ability to go to their local agricultural bank and borrow against that in order to deal with some of their cash flow issues. And so it's exciting to be able to provide farmers that type of tool that really helps them manage their business and predict their yield. And then that yield prediction allows us to compare to potential. So a tree of that age has a certain potential, and are they achieving that potential? And if they're not, what are their roadblocks to achieving that potential? So we can design some experiments to help improve, or we can just use actual agronomic science. And we have a very large agronomy team to make recommendations to those individual farms or the organizations. And then lastly, as we aggregate all of this data, we've got contracts with a number of governments in the world. They use the information to build education programs. So we work with large agricultural NGOs and then governments. And if they see that the same thing is going on with a group of corn farmers in an area of Uganda, but that area has, 100,000 other corn farmers, they can start disseminating information even to users outside our group on how they can improve their operations.
And I'm curious, how do you see blockchain technology revolutionizing sustainable agriculture, especially concerning key areas such as traceability, transparency, etc.? And how are you guys also leveraging this technology to promote responsible farming practices and combat deforestation and things like this? Because I think it's an area that people don't associate with blockchain technology. They associate it with things like crypto, etc. And we're solving real world problems here, aren't we?
Yeah. So I've been in blockchain for a number of years now. And, I do look at blockchain with crypto and without crypto. So if I look at blockchain without crypto, we have challenges around the world. And let me describe a challenge. In Uganda, the majority of cattle are sold domestically. They want to increase their export. They can get more dollars. Same challenges in Colombia. We're working in cattle there. Some of the problems that they have is around creation of documentation. And there's a lot of fraud in documentation creation around the world. And a lot of buying organizations and governments are skeptical because some of the documentation they receive on import looks false. The pieces don't add up. And so they put more import restrictions in order to make sure that documentation is being produced, not just the day before you're shipping, but throughout the life of an animal or the life of a crop. And so blockchain fits nicely with that because it is an immutable record. And as we're collecting data, we're timestamping that, and the data is not modifiable. What I've found in other projects is that a lot of that fraud still occurs in some of the large ERP systems because people can go in and modify records and change records over time. Blockchain provides a public view of that. And in one area, for sustainable agriculture, we're really focused on deforestation. And the EU has new deforestation regulations that have recently been improved. They are coming out in 2024. And in 2024, all of the large organizations who are importing cocoa for coffee or cattle for seed covers or meat, for leather products, coffee and soybean, those are all products that are associated with deforestation. And the new EUDR rule says that an individual farm can't deforest after 2020. And they need to certify that. So we use satellite technology in order to do that. The other thing is those farmers using our application. Now we see how often are they on their farm. One piece of fraud that we've seen in South America is that farmers know they need to not deforest. So they claim their product is grown in an area that they know is not deforested, even if they're deforesting. And that's a small percentage. Not everybody's a bad actor, but those are the types of challenges that the EU is trying to address. So how do you assess whether a farmer grew that on their farm? Well, we can use our AI tool to assess how many kilos of a product should be coming off of that farm. And we can tell how many kilos are actually being exported, and does that tend to match? The farmer's geolocation on his cell phone is recorded within the system and recorded within the blockchain. And we can see that farmer was at the farm producing 100 times last year. It's very low probability that's fraudulent, where that farmer is a good actor, is working on their farm, and is doing data reporting every day. And then we can take that data and share it with the other stakeholders in the supply chain, like the EU, to show that farmer is farming responsibly, is not deforesting their area, and that the quality and provenance of the product is what they're saying it is. Yeah, that really creates that balance between government, the corporations who are importing, and the farmers. And that's an area of growth in the world that, most large manufacturers that we're dealing with today don't have an intimate relationship with the farmer. They tend to have a relationship with a packing house or a trader, and they don't really have a lot of information on what's going on the farm and whether those farms are compliant. And the EU has changed that. That relationship needs to change with every organization now. They put huge penalties on EU manufacturers, 4% of the gross EU revenue. So imagine a car company that is buying leather seats, and those seats come from cattle involved in deforestation. Now the EU has said they need to prove that those cattle are deforestation free, not associated with deforestation, or there's a penalty, and a very significant penalty. Blockchain fits into that.
It really does. And I think we should also highlight at this point as well, that it's not just blockchain. From machine learning based advice to DeFi loans, you offer a myriad of services to farmers. And I'm curious how they're transforming traditional farming methodologies too. Anything you can share around how you're ensuring accessibility and ultimately education for farmers to fully utilize these tools? Because I imagine that the last thing that some people in this industry care about is technology, or is that changing now?
Yeah. So, as we look around education and training, we run training sessions. Again, we don't sell to individual farmers. Yeah. We sell to cooperatives and larger organizations. And part of the reason for that is our ability to support those organizations. I was on a training session this morning, particularly the avocado session that I was talking about earlier, or a project that I was talking about earlier, where we're training a group of another 100 farmers in order to leverage the system. We use machine learning to assess the data that we have coming in. And we also have satellite data, and we use, artificial intelligence and machine learning to deal with large swaths of data that we're getting from there. We've got a great machine learning team dedicated to understanding deforestation and how to assess deforestation. And there's two groups of deforestation systems in the world. There's a group that takes satellite and they evaluate whether a tree was there in 2020 and is the tree still there today. And then we take that to the next level, because the EU and different countries like Brazil have definitions of deforestation, and deforestation has to be a certain area. We have to evaluate the canopy cover and what percentage of canopy cover existed and exists now. And are we meeting a certain threshold? And then we have to evaluate the height of the trees. Most systems in the world do not evaluate the height of the trees. So we have a huge database of tree-based data that we're using to look at height of trees, because deforestation of a tree under 5 meters isn't deforestation. So assessing that from a satellite that's looking from, space down is very difficult and very expensive. And most of the platforms in the world don't have the ability to deal with that. We've developed methods to deal with that using other data sets that we have access to, and collecting data ourselves. And then, we take that and we combine it and we create 5 layers of assessment. One of the things most people don't know in EUDR is you have to predict the future. And if a tree today is 4 meters, but you expect that tree to be 5 meters in 3 years, cutting down that tree is deforestation versus a tree that's going to, stop growing at 4 meters. And when you're looking at millions, even billions of trees in these farming areas, you can only do that with machine learning. We can't do that with people, and we can't do that with base satellite reports. So that really is a great tool for machine learning. The other thing we do on the cattle side is we did a major project a couple years ago on cattle genetics, and we have AI and traditional statistical analysis that evaluates hereditary differences between cows and can predict the transmittability or transferability of genetic features within a herd. So a farmer can make breeding decisions if they're choosing to breed, bull 1 with cow 2. Is that a good decision? And what's the result of that going to be? So we can start predicting, like, our disease is going to be passed on because that's a bad combination from a breeding perspective. Is that animal capable, or the offspring from a predictable perspective, going to produce a large volume of milk or a lesser volume of milk. And there's a lot of, I think we have 10 or 15 features where we can take the expected progeny differences and the breeding values based on historical data of the parents and grandparents of an individual animal and determine if that's a good breeding decision or not. And what that does is, using a very simple system, you can make decisions that are going to make differences that potentially are hundreds of dollars in cost through health problems, or $100 in revenue because of the potential if you make better breeding decisions. And we're trying to take that from, a lot of the science has existed a long time, but it's very difficult to apply for a farmer. And how do we make that available to a farmer who's got 100 head of cattle? So our ability to use machine learning for that is really making an impact from a cost management and revenue management perspective.
And before you came on the podcast today, I was doing a little research, and I quickly learned that you've got over 100,000 farmers connected in 18 different countries, a global reach, which is incredibly impressive. But what are your key strategies for further expansion? Where do you go from here, and how are you adapting the platform to suit a diverse agricultural landscape and, of course, regulations across different regions? Because I would imagine that is quite tricky too.
Yeah, certainly. We started with a couple projects, and I can't say they were small projects. They're quite large projects. And what our evolution is now is we're trying to build our infrastructure in order to deal with smaller cooperatives of 200 to 400 farmers. Historically, we're dealing with cooperatives of many thousands. The organizations that we've signed agreements with, although not all of the projects are funded yet, have about 20 million farmers. Yeah. So in order to access those 20 million farmers, we need to work on funding opportunities with NGOs and governments and the buyers of their product. So that's a big effort. And we do that on a project by project basis. So we know we can't get from where we 20 million overnight. And that just takes a lot of work in order to do that. It takes some business development work. And then, our system is only a few years old. So part of it is adding crops. We have a team that's constantly adding crops. We add a couple of crops to our system every month. And we don't look at a crop from a global perspective. Growing an avocado in Kenya is different than growing an avocado in California. And so our system takes those regional nuances into consideration. And so that takes more time from a development perspective. So strategically, we pick the crops that we're going to work on, and then we go work with a project. We pick a few thousand farms in a cooperative, or hopefully in the future, more often a few hundred farms in a cooperative, and work with them to evolve the capabilities of the system to help them succeed in their own environment. It's really easy to provide the basic, wiki on how do you grow an avocado. What we're trying to do is, how do you grow an avocado on the side of a mountain with these climatic conditions, with these levels of access to water and these pests and these diseases, and really help an organization prosper from that perspective. Hope that answered your question.
Yeah, and you mentioned the climatic conditions there, and I think the adverse effects of climate change present substantial challenges to agriculture. So how is the platform aiding farmers in adapting to some of these challenges that we're seeing on our news feeds every single day? And what role do you see technology playing in building resilience and helping to support farmers in navigating these climatic uncertainties?
Yeah, so, there's a number of ways that we work with that today. One is we can look historically. We can pull the last 20 years of satellite reports for a farm and see how moisture in an area has changed.
Yeah.
We can see how weather has changed over that time, and using history as a predictor and using current events as a predictor may change the time that a farmer needs to plant to be successful. When you're planting corn, there are critical irrigation requirements that most of the world relies on natural rainfall. So we see changes in those patterns, and we can help a farmer who maybe got taught by their grandfather. I learned a lot about farming from my grandfather, and they make decisions which were based on the events of 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, because that's how they were taught. And getting new information to them around how they need to change their agronomic practices, around their decisions on when to plant, even, around farming in a more sustainable way with multi-cropping or cover crops and different strategies that will help them retain nutrients in the soil, retain organic carbon, or, mitigate the impact of carbon releases on their farm. All of that has changed, and the science around it is progressing quite rapidly. And then the education of millions and millions of farmers. Farming is, a quarter of the world's population or a fifth of the world's population is somehow involved in the food chain. How do you educate a group that big without data and tools? And, it's a challenge for governments, but it's a challenge for us as well.
Well, it's been a huge pleasure having you on the podcast. There's one other thing I've got to ask. I'm kind of curious because there's so much heat around this topic at the moment, and that is around the ethical considerations guiding the design and deployment of agriculture technology solutions. Is it tricky? How do you balance technological innovation with social responsibility, especially when dealing with a sector as vital and complex as agriculture? Because I would imagine it's something that's much more complex than even it sounds.
Yeah, so there's certainly some complex components to that, and there's some simple components to that. And so initially we focus on the simple components. What is the education level or knowledge level of an existing farmer or farming group? And what are their objectives? We like to guide people on where we think they should go, but at the same time, us learning what their objectives are really is a driver of how we're going to partner with them. We can only address certain elements of sustainability and social responsibility with a system. Farming organizations need to make decisions, and part of that decision making is driven by consumer organizations. Deforestation is a big driving factor for the EU, for 150 nations that have signed a pact associated with that. That becomes a little cut and dry for us. But, if you look at it from the farmer's perspective, if that farmer only has, 2 hectares of land and they have already deforested, how do we help them? They're no longer allowed to sell their product to the EU. And so, because they previously sold to the EU in order to get the best dollar, they lost that customer with the new regulation. There's some ethical and social and challenges for that farmer, and the farmer still needs to feed their family, even though the regulation may prevent some of that. So, our objective really is, how do we take any farmer and help them increase their yield, reduce their cost, mitigate their risks? And then how do we help them with the regulatory and social challenges that are going to help them grow? We work with this cooperative in Indonesia, and they need traceability. They need traceability of non-child labor and organic products. So we need to create a method to help them. Those things exist in their supply chain. In the end, do I believe in those regulations? Absolutely. Yeah. But translating a belief or a desire into practical application on the ground is really what we focus on. So if an organization importing coffee into the EU has specific goals that they've set, it's really around how do we use technology to help with those goals. I am not the political person that wants to get involved in the debate of those goals. In some areas, maybe I'm not educated well enough to understand them. I try to keep myself fairly well educated on what's going on in the world, but there's only certain things we can do with technology. So It is the application of those ethical considerations and how they drive change in a world economy when the world is adapting at a different rate, country by country. And the EU is years or decades ahead of some of the countries where the crops are produced. So how do you create that trickle down effect is really one of the challenges that we have.
Well, I always say at the end of every episode that technology works best when it brings people together. But the work you're doing here, leveraging technology to help farmers reach a variety of goals and real world impact, it's nothing short of inspiring. And I can't thank you enough for coming on here and sharing your time to share these insights. And before I let you go, I'm going to see if there's something we can do for you here, because some of the biggest names in business, VC funding and tech have either been guests or listened to this podcast. So if there was a person that you'd love to have a private breakfast or lunch with, who would it be and why? Because he or she might just hear this, and I'd love to see if we can have a little experiment and see if we can manifest a meeting today. But who would that person be?
Well, I think there's lots of people that I would love to meet. A big one who's making a large impact around the world in developing food and food safety and food quality is Bill Gates. And I met him at a conference a number of years ago, but we weren't focused on the same issues at that point. But he has a large global organization that, similar to many others, that are driving investment into projects like these. And I'd love to pick his brain on what has made him successful in supporting organizations in some of these countries. And, how do you bridge that technology gap? He's got the technology background, but I think this latter part of his career, he's really been focused on the philanthropic, solving some of the world's big problems. And, I, at a very much smaller scale, have had a technology career and a supply chain career. And now I'm trying to touch on more and more of these key issues. So I'd love to pick his brain on that and learn a little bit about it from him.
Fantastic. And for anyone listening that would want to find out more information about your work, about the platform, use cases, and just expand on anything that we've talked about today, what's the best starting point for everything?
Yeah, probably the easiest way is to go to our website, dimitra.io. They can learn a little bit around some of the projects that we're doing. We have lots of social media and media coverage, and we link a lot of that on our news page. And then beyond that, if they want to reach out, people can reach directly to me. And it's Jon@dimitra.io, and Jon is spelled Jon.
Well, I'll have links to both of those so people can find you nice and easily. And I think as the world continues to face the adverse effects of global warming and also the increasing need to change how companies approach natural resources, just inspirational what you're doing here. And I've genuinely loved exploring how this technology has an even larger role to play in just about everything here. So more than anything, just thank you for taking the time, sit down and share your story. Thank you so much, Jon.
Well, I'd like to reciprocate that. Thank you for having me here. Telling the story to the world is how we move ahead and start some of the conversations. So you're opening this up to your listeners, and hopefully that starts some good conversations that allow us to continue making impactful change in cooperatives around the world and within large food companies and agricultural companies.
What an extraordinary conversation, capturing the essence, I think, of innovation at the intersection of agriculture, blockchain and sustainability. So a big thank you to Jon Trask, CEO of Dimitra, for joining us today and sharing his insights on how technology is serving as a tool for the good, especially for smallholder farmers who are often the most impacted by the challenges in modern agriculture. And as we reflect on today's discussion, I think it's clear that blockchain and other emerging technologies are not just disruptors. They are enablers of change, sustainability, social equity. And I think Jon offered us a timely reminder that technology has the potential to play a much larger role in combating climate change and fostering sustainable practices in agriculture and beyond. And for those of you who are as captivated as I am by Dimitra's work, be sure to check out their platform and the multitude of services they offer, from machine learning to DeFi loans. The links to their website and resources will be in the show notes, so don't miss out there. But that brings us to the end of Tech Talks Daily today. So I'm your host, Neil C. Hughes. it's always my goal to try and illuminate the various facets of technology and how it impacts our world. So thank you for tuning in. And until next time, please leave a rating and review if you've enjoyed today's episode. And I also cordially invite you to join me again tomorrow, same time. We'll do it all again with a different guest and a different topic. Every day is completely different on here, so hopefully you'll drop by again. But thank you for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.